everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with my friend Ben. We are going to be covering what trauma looks like in regards to our family. Our family shapes a lot of our childhood. They shape a lot of who we become. And so we want to talk about Ben's story, and he's going to give us a little insight as to what he experienced, what kind of trauma he faced, and also how the Lord revealed a lot of things to him through it. So Ben, do you mind giving us a little background about who you are, what your childhood looked like, and a few experiences that you had as a child?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I grew up surrounded by Christianity, going to church every week. My parents were in ministry. And early on, I would say I had an understanding of the gospel and that God loved me, that he wanted a relationship with me, but that my sin, the wrong I had done was separating me. But through Jesus and his life, his death, his resurrection, I could have this, restored relationship with God. So I got that in early age, probably around the age of 4. I was like, yes, this is awesome. I'm all in. That relationship was restored. But a lot of other relationships in my life were broken, particularly in my family. Just growing up, I often felt like I didn't fit in my family. And a lot of that had to do just growing up, facing my dad's anger, his high expectations. I remember if I did something wrong, just often at the drop of a hat, he would lash out at me, yell at me, and I would just, almost anxiety would build, and I would await. When is he going to come in here? When is he going to rage? When am I going to be spanked, pinned down, things like that. So I quickly, at an early age, felt rejected, learned to fear my dad. I remember one time, probably around the age of 8, doing something, to my sister, like teasing her or whatnot. And my dad we were both in the bathroom. I think it was in the morning getting ready. And my dad went off. So somehow I ended up locking myself in the bathroom. And he was pounding on the door, threatening to take me down to the police station, saying that they would sort me out. He also threatened things like sending me off to boarding school and whatnot. So in that moment, as an 8-year-old, I felt trapped. I'm faced on the one hand with my dad and maybe being sent away from my family. And I was legitimately thinking about jumping out the window and running away. It was like, these are the two realities that I'm trapped in, and I don't know what to do. And that was horrifying as a kid. And I think those experiences again and again with my dad, and then also later being bullied by kids in school, just really caused me to think and believe that I'm alone, something is wrong with me, I'm not good enough. Like, I'm the lowest common denominator of things, of all these situations, so I must be wrong. And I deeply believe that at a core level.
Yeah. Can you give us a little insight as to the different things that kind of confirmed those lies over the years? I know we had discussed a little bit about your dad and even people in school growing up kind of just confirming lies that you had believed at an early age. Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I think one of the things was, my mom was there too and present, but a lot of times she didn't intervene or stand up for me. So on the one hand, I have this stuff coming from my dad, and on the other hand, subconsciously, I'm thinking the person who can protect me or who is supposed to protect me is not going to. So not only am I being hurt and rejected, emotionally, physically, but I'm stuck and there's nothing I can do about it. And that happening again and again. Then I would say in middle school, it was middle school. Some friends and I, as we were growing up, I had 2 friends, and 3 of us together were all real close. But the language we used with one another, the amount of teasing, the bullying, the calling each other names like fat or things I won't repeat here, over and over again, was just kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. And I remember one time, one of my friends, we were headed in my parents', I think it was a van back then, to the swimming pool. My friend and I, we both had our shirts off. And he looked at me and said, "I'm fat, but not as fat as you." And as a 10-year-old, it was almost like, in that moment, shame and this, oh my gosh, is that true? Like something I had never thought about before or seen before, all of a sudden became what I thought was reality. And I thought that, I accepted that as truth, that, oh, this is who I am now. So now that kind of changed, or entered in a lot of struggles of overeating and dieting and body image issues, and for years trying to fix that about myself.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of those unwanted behaviors that you think came from just the different trauma that built up over the years? Mm-hmm. How did you end up dealing with that, coping with that? How was that expressed through you?
Yeah, I think in addition to all of these hurts from other people, there's things that started to happen around the age of 8. I started developing anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorders. I remember starting to regularly have out-of-body experiences in group situations because of the situation I had with a teacher where she publicly shamed me. So early on, anxiety for me was a way, it wasn't random. It was a way of always being on alert. When's the next time I'm going to be hurt? When's the next time I'm going to be rejected? Depression for me was a way of, when I couldn't fight the lies from the hurt anymore, of turning inward and agreeing with them and saying, yeah, that's who I am, and just feeling so bad about myself. With obsessive compulsive disorder, I remember that getting so bad where I was obsessing about God and does he exist or not, and what eventually that confusion, and again, feeling so alone, I wasn't talking to anybody about these things, trying to make sense of it on my own as a kid. What that led to was this feeling of, or this thought of, every time I have a doubt about God's existence, I must no longer be saved. I must no longer be a Christian. So what that led to was just this intense fear, horror. This horror every single day, 20 times a day, whenever I had a doubt, shoot, I'm no longer a Christian. I am going to hell. I'm going to be separated from God forever. And then praying the sinner's prayer. So for upwards of 10 years, every single day, I was having these doubts. I was fearing going to hell. I was praying that God would save me. And even when I could get the prayer right, or it felt right, I still wasn't convinced, that I wouldn't go to hell. And then just the fear, the constant fear in that awareness of, shoot, I'm going to hell, and how that impacted me, and the terror got to a point where I just really wished I had never been born.
Thank you for sharing all of that, because I know that that's not easy to revisit and go through. So we've talked from the beginning about how the different experiences that you had with your father really shaped what you thought about yourself, even shaped how you saw your mom, and then eventually led into how you viewed yourself in relationships. And we talked about even having your friend call you out in ways that you had never seen yourself before, and how that also led into all of these things that you needed to cope from. And so what are some of those things that you ran to? What are some of the things that felt like it gave you the control that you needed in the midst of chaos in your mind?
Well, I'd definitely say the anxiety that I mentioned, the depression, the OCD, and then eventually overeating and undereating, and pornography was huge when that entered in. When I discovered that, because nothing could bring me this high and this escape like pornography could. But also it was, one of the things I discovered was pornography was ultimately not my problem. It was my pseudo solution. I was seeking nurture and love and attention and escape in that. I discovered that all of these unwanted behaviors, these struggles, weren't random. There was a reason I was going to them, and it was directly related to the pain and the unmet needs and the hurt that I was experiencing. And but once I went down the road of pornography and got addicted, and it rewired my mind, and it was like game over. I felt so worthless. It's like I went to that to feel better, but it just left me feeling more and more hopeless and worthless. And with all of these, struggles, the mental health issues, then even more so, I thought, oh yeah, this affirms what people have been communicating to me my whole life. I'm not good enough. I've got these struggles. Something is wrong with me.
At the time that you were going through all of this, were you aware of the fact that all of these behavioral issues were post-trauma, that they actually stemmed from trauma? Or was it more of just trying to survive and the natural instincts that came from that?
Yeah, no, I wasn't aware. I wasn't even aware that I had experienced trauma. And I think that can happen to so many of us. We have no other life experience to compare ours to what we know is normal. So that was my normal. I had no idea why these behaviors were there. I just wanted them gone. But they were there for a purpose. Even I think when I started to realize, thinking back on the first time I had suicidal thoughts, and my parents, I was really close to some friends when we lived overseas, and then I was told we were moving yet once again, and it literally felt like almost like my family, or my pseudo family of friends, was being taken away from me. And I remember in a split level house, there's these stairs going all the way up, and you could look down, and it was a far jump. And I was in so much agony and pain the first time, that it crossed my mind of, I don't know if I want to be here anymore. What if I just jump? This isn't going to happen anymore. So I didn't have an awareness of that it was trauma, that all of these things weren't random, that I was struggling with. But something within me knew this isn't how it's supposed to be.
Had you told anyone at the time, or was anyone aware that you were having these thoughts?
Not really. After experiencing just so much hurt growing up, that just led to me shutting down. If I don't feel accepted by the people that are supposed to be there, then why would I? My thought was, well, I'm not going to share this with anyone because I'll be rejected.
After years and this long time frame of moments that really built up of trauma in your life, when was it that it felt like it all just became too overwhelming to the point that it broke you?
There's a lot of stuff that mounted up in high school, just continuing down these pathways, the frustration, especially the doubts about God's existence, like every single day, 20 times a day, thinking that I'm going to hell. It was just torture. So I started to grow angry towards God, angry at my family, just angry towards life in general. And I was so frustrated with God, like, God, why aren't you fixing this? Why? I want to believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, but why are these doubts not going away? If you are who you say you are. And eventually that anger building, there's something that happened. It was when I was 17, my parents woke me up one Saturday morning, I think it was, and shared that my grandfather had died by suicide. And I was just angry. It felt so disorienting. I'm like, he was 93. I wasn't all that close to him, but man, there's just, I think, so much going on in my soul at the time. Of all people, him, if that could happen to him, I was angry and I blamed God for it. That was kind of like the final straw. And then after all of that, I was like, it was almost like instantly. I was like, whatever, God, I'm done. And walked away from God, started running from him. And basically what that meant was didn't want to talk to him, didn't want to be around Christians for the most part, didn't want to go to church, just kind of stiff-armed that whole thing that I grew up with.
Throughout that time that you felt like you just didn't want anything to do with the Lord, what were different things that you turned to in that anger and in that pain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the time I didn't know I was turning to anything, but looking back, it was like, oh, bro, you were turning to a lot. Like anger for me was huge during that time. It was like this way of compensating and protecting myself and stiff-arming everybody around me and keeping people away. So I was just angry. I wasn't a good friend. I would say hurtful things. And I started to grow cold and just really didn't care. I became really, really selfish. And it was like waking up each day, it was kind of like, what's going to bring me the most happiness? What do I want to do today? What do I want to do in the future with my career? Because I was going away to college shortly after that and during that time. Pornography continued to escalate. Eating, overeating, undereating, dieting. I started gaining a lot of weight in that first year. It was probably 30, 40 pounds. And eventually it got up to about 110, 120 pounds from overeating. My life was out of control.
Do you feel like during that time, the eating was a way that you were able to control what was happening around you?
Oh, totally. When I would overeat, it was like an escape. And that was a way of when life or situations got so painful, it was almost like I didn't have to feel it for an hour or 2 hours. And then another thing was, as I started to gain weight and not be happy with how I looked, when I would crash diet, that was a way of trying to gain control and trying to almost like fix the mistakes that I'd made to my body. And obsessing about that rather than the reality of life kind of gave me something I felt like I could control, or it was something that almost helped me survive during the time.
As you were going through all of this, and especially walking through that specific period, how did you view yourself? And did you like yourself?
Oh, no chance. I didn't like myself. With all of that stuff, I'd say not only did I not like myself, I hated myself. It's like, why am I here? I wish God never made me. I don't look good, struggling with all these things, not disciplined. I'm addicted to this, so angry. Where are you, God? All this stuff has happened. So I think eventually when we experience, at least for me, when I experienced all of these things, it was only a matter of time before it reflected on how I viewed myself. And as I accepted it as, I identified myself based on these behaviors, based on these struggles.
Well, we had talked about whenever we met how you really even went through that first year of college feeling like that, but that you had met some incredible friends that made a huge impact on your life and on your story. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that time?
Yeah, it was an awesome time. Just with, I think, 17, 18 years of hurt and struggle and anger and not feeling like I belonged. I encountered these people who were awesome. They loved Jesus and they they lived like him. They were like Jesus to me. They were welcoming, they were accepting. For whatever reason, they thought I was awesome. And they treated me that way. And just the love was contagious. It was infectious. And so it was actually because of them that I decided to go to the university that I ended up going to, even though I didn't want anything to do with God at the time. So after month of just being around these people, there's one guy in particular, his name is Patrick. I just started to feel safe. I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, he was like one of the first safe people, I would say, that I started to encounter. And one day we were hanging out at a restaurant, and he just point blank, we hadn't really talked about faith before. I'd known him for a year and a half. He asked me if I had a relationship with God, and I just broke. And it was a mess. It was like tears were streaming down in the restaurant, messy cry. And I couldn't get any words out. He threw some money down on the table. We went out to his car and sat, and it was about 25 or 30 minutes before he had to be so confused. He's like, what's going on, bro? Did I offend you? No. But eventually I shared with him, like, dude, here's everything that's been going on. And here are things that have gone on the past 4 years that I've never told anybody, in the horror and the fear and just being consumed with the thought of going to hell, and then the doubts, and then the anger, the home life. I finally shared that with someone. And he didn't try to fix me. He didn't try to offer advice. He just affirmed my feelings and my experience and listened to me and encouraged me. And that was a breakthrough moment for me. That was a shift in my life where, like, my heart had grown so cold, but now it had started to soften because of God's work through him. And a couple months later, more conversations. I just was so sick and tired of being sick and tired and running from God. And the way I was living wasn't working, and it wasn't satisfying, and this is not what I wanted. And through a series of events, began running after Jesus again and rededicated my life as an adult to him, and was like, let's go. And continued to walk with those people and find more and more hope and healing.
There's so much that I love about your story. One of the things that really stands out to me that I don't think we always talk about or even see a lot anymore is that the people that really shifted your view of yourself and started to make you feel safe and ultimately led to that breakthrough were people who really loved you well, even when you weren't in the perfect place. Mm-hmm. Would you say that it really was the Lord moving through Patrick that was really what broke that wall that you had up that whole time?
Oh, for sure. It's like, and that's something I often think about, like, he was surrendered to the Holy Spirit, surrendered to God. Like, dude loved Jesus like nobody else I knew. And he was open and willing. And what happened, God honored that. And then God came through him to meet and love and care for me in a way that I so desperately needed, that nobody else for 18 years had been able to do.
Would you say that that experience with Patrick was really one of the first times that you recognized that what you thought was normal in relationships and love really wasn't, and that you had even started to realize that you had gone through some trauma?
Yeah, in that moment, I didn't realize what I had experienced was trauma. I think, again, it was just my normal. I don't think I even knew what trauma was. I think it was like, oh yeah, this happened in the past. I'm still kind of angry about it. And then I've got these doubts about God's existence. But I think what started to happen, and I didn't even know it, was as I got more and more involved and around this group of people and learned more about God, it started to slowly shift some things. My view of myself, my understanding of God, my understanding of people and what healthy relationships are, I started to get there over the next 4 years. But one of the biggest switches for me was when I reached out for help and started going through this outpatient process for porn addiction, meeting with a trauma specialist and therapist. And he, I would say, for the first time, kind of laid out all of these puzzle pieces of my life. It was like, here's why you do this, and here's why this is going on, and here's why this is going on. Here's what happened in your family and why you view God that way, and believe that about yourself. And I remember my first session with him after I did all of this testing, and he sat down with me. It was like mind blown, but also like it all made sense. And it brought some kind of clarity and encouragement to me, because it was like, you've been through a lot. And it's not just that you have these different random struggles, but it's all integrated, and God's going to heal you. And we're going to work together the next couple of years. And so through a series of working with him and group support and just this daily shift of getting support, processing my emotions, even learning, what was going on inside of me, learning on a daily basis, how was all of this hurt, this trauma from the past coming up and affecting, like being lived out now in these survival behaviors that I no longer need, because I'm surrendering, was surrendering them, and God wants to offer me something better, his safety, rather than anxiety, his hope and joy rather than depression, his love through other people rather than porn. So as the years went by and I had this new lifestyle, reaching out to others, safe friends, therapy, my mindset really started to shift. I think what it really comes down to is we're hurt experientially in relationships, and we have to be healed experientially in relationships. And that's what Jesus did in my life.
Wow, that's so powerful. I love that you've said that even over a period of 4 years, the Lord had revealed a lot to you, because a lot of times when we think about trauma or we go through something painful, we think that there are these kind of bandages that we can slap on things. But ultimately, it really is over time, the Lord does reveal different things and pull down different strongholds and lies that we're believing. Would you say that you still work on some of the things that you struggled with from before, or have you found really a lot of freedom ever since?
Mm-hmm. Some things, it's like total freedom. Like with pornography, I was so addicted, and now I've been free for 6.5 years. Haven't been back, not going back. But with other things depression's gotten a lot better. It goes away completely at times. It's really not much of an issue. There's other things that are still there. And this is something just to encourage people watching, like, I know this is true in my life, I can be so focused on wanting to get rid of once and for all, like my anxiety, my fear of public speaking, my fear of rejection, things that continue to happen. But just remembering that, the pain is real, and we've been through a lot, and we're still here, and God's got a plan, and it's a process. And yeah, he can do miracles and set us free instantly. But what if he wanted to do more through the process of healing rather than the product of healing? Yeah. Forgive me for my crass word of using product as healing, but what if that was, he wanted to draw you closer to him, to other people, wanted to use you in the mess. And that's kind of what I've continued to experience over and over.
As you've gone through and experienced those moments with the Lord, I think it shifts our entire mindset when we go through those, when the Lord uses us in the midst of our pain and brokenness. Would you say that that's something that you ultimately have been thankful to experience, or something that still just kind of rubs you the wrong way?
Yeah, looking back, I'm thankful for my journey, and thankful for how I've seen my need for God, my need for people, and just seen God's power through it. And then also, where I am today, still healing, still growing, but to see our world, the hurt, the pain, this next generation, so many people questioning, doubting, growing up, consumed in these things that I experienced. Man, God I'm thankful to be used now to offer proven principles, biblical principles, things I've learned from brain science and psychology to help other people meet Jesus. Like, let's leverage those felt needs and that pain and point them to the one who has the answers and from whom all things flow. But also just to be who God created them to be.
So looking back and knowing that and seeing the thankfulness that you have for what you've experienced, will you tell us a little bit about what life is like now and how that really fed into what you're doing and all that God's doing through you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the thankfulness, and even, amidst with the thankfulness, I don't want to discount in my story, anybody's story, how hard it still can be to look back on the stuff, we've weathered, that we've been through. But that has really led to like a passion. My old therapist used to say, let's get some sweet revenge against the enemy. It's like, I'm sick of I saw what the enemy wanted to do in my life. I see what he's wanting to do in this generation. I see what he's, done to like my family, to my friends. And I'm just more and more aware that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and that at the same time we have the hope and the answers. And so now it's led to 9 years in full-time ministry, leading recovery groups, speaking and writing, now leading the resolution movement, the resolution movement to resolution people all across the globe, online, in person, videos, with biblically based, neuroscientifically informed, psychologically informed solutions to their hurts and struggles so that ultimately they can meet Jesus, they can thrive in life, and they can tell others about him. So it's a joy to get to be a part of.
Well, that gets me fired up. Mm-hmm. I love everything that you're doing and everything that the resolution movement is about. As we kind of wrap up here and close out, is there any advice that you would give to anyone who has kind of gone through similar things that you have? Is there any advice you'd give them as they are experiencing their trauma and then trying to heal from it?
Mm-hmm. I'd say one is just that we need to, or certain things can't be healed until they're heard. We need other people. We're created in God's image. God is triune. We need people. We need their support. We're hurt in relationships. We're healed in relationships. And the starting point, if you've never shared something, is to find a safe person who's not going to judge, condemn, or try and fix you, but who's going to listen to you. Kind of like in my story, when Patrick just listened to me. Like that's what we need. We need to know that we're not crazy. Because we're not. It was not our fault. It wasn't our sin that caused this to happen. It wasn't, whatever. The pain is real and it's valid. We need someone to validate that and then to begin supporting us in the journey. And I think the second one that I'm continuing to learn is just this idea of self-compassion and kindness. I think it's Romans 2, it says that it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. Repent, to turn around, to change your mindset. I know that's about sin, but what I think it's about can be applied to growth in general, like getting God's kindness on us for our struggles. Rather than continually condemning our struggles, let's start questioning our struggles. Rather than being like, oh, I'm so mad that I'm still dealing with that trauma symptom, that trauma reaction, that addiction that flowed out of this. Self-compassion and curiosity and kindness, that coming from God to us is what we need. Like, if we're stuck in sin as a result of responding to our trauma or whatnot, Jesus already defeated Satan, sin, and death. He's not obsessed with your sin. He's obsessed with a relationship with you. We can have compassion for ourselves and where we're at in that struggle. And that's something I've been continuing to do just with the anxiety and some of the things that I'm continuing to grow through is, affirming words of God, speaking them into myself, and being okay with where I'm at, being okay with where we're at, through all the things that we've weathered.
Man, Ben, now I'm like pumped for life. I'm ready to go tackle some demons out there. I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us, for sharing all that you have in your vulnerability, because I know that had to impact so many of you who have experienced similar things as well. Thank you for joining us, and I will see you guys later.